does the Tundra compare to the space station? You've actually spent up to 6 months on the space station. I can't even imagine.
It was wonderful. Like it's the most amazing place, especially, I mean, I think many of you out there, and I know here with Elise and I, you know, we're very mission oriented. We, you know, have acquired skills over our lifetime that we think can help make a difference, and our ideas can help make a difference, and as can yours. But it seems to happen in some pretty strange but exciting places that we actually work. I mean, partly because, you know, this is like, you know, this is the way science is.
Yeah.
You have to go where the data is, and understanding, I love that the science that we do up on the space station is actually very applicable back here on Earth, and I'm sure we can talk about more of that later. But I was literally shocked when I won't say we drove up, but we rumbled up in the Tundra buggy to the Tundra Buggy Lodge, and my first thought was, this is exactly like living on a space station. Because, I mean, of course, the first thing that happens, even before you know, when you first get on the Tundra buggy, is a safety lecture. And you find out that, you know, because, you know, we are studying and understanding the polar bears and trying to do that in their environment, we will never set foot on the ground. Me as a person who came to look and learn, and that's it's the most dangerous thing is to, like, and it's just like space. I mean, we can't go outside when we feel like it if we wish our crewmates were different or something like that. But also everything that comes up to the space station has to be brought there. And so we have to be careful with all of our resources. And so the Tundra buggies, you know, dock to the space station, and then they bring people and stuff and accomplish a mission, and then they undock and go back home. But in the meantime, it's a pretty neat place to live. I mean, the kitchen staff stays in the Tundra Buggy Lodge for like 2 months.
Right, only really walking east to west. They don't really get to even walk north to south.
That's very funny, because it's this. Why does the station face east to west?
I think you just get the best view of the bay that way out at Polar Bear Point. So it kind of just happens to be how it's oriented.
And that's where all the action is happening. And you know, it's really cool to see in a tourist sort of way, but it's certainly also astonishing data.
Right. One of the things we were talking about differences last night was the wind. Maybe that's the one thing you don't get so much in space, and last night it was wild out here.
And you know, people said to me, because they know I'm here, right, that they know, I mean, in my group, they know I'm, or in both groups of people that are up here, and they said, oh, this must feel like, you know, when you sleep at night and you feel the rocking back and forth, that must feel like a space station. I'm like, no, there's no rocking. I felt like I was on a boat.
Oh, you did? It's more like a boat, right?
For me, yeah.
How do you sleep on a space station? Do you have like pods, or do you have to tie yourself to the bed?
What's kind of cool, I mean, here at Tundra Buggy Lodge, they have bunks. And I've done some other things over the years to practice being in space without, I mean, it's really expensive and hard to go to space, so we try to practice down here on the ground. And in all of them, like how you live and how you sleep especially, I lived underwater where there was 6 bunks for the 6 of us.
Oh my gosh.
And to get to my bunk on the top, I mean, I learned like on day 1, that bottom bunk and that second bunk, they belong to people. That is their home. And you will not step in someone's home, even with your foot, clean foot. You know, it's just it's somebody's home.
Respect.
And so it's interesting down here, we actually have more privacy, I would say, up in space, in that we each have a cabin the size of like a bathroom stall. I mean, actually about half of a bathroom stall, okay? But it's enough room for me and my computer desk, which I can put up or down, and then my sleeping bag, which I can clip to the back of the wall so that when I slither into it like a snake, then, and there's armholes for me in my sleeping bag, then I can just sleep, and people's arms like go like this. Some people like to have something on their eyes. Some people miss having a pillow, and they strap a pillow to their head. A lot of people, I don't quite care, right?
Yeah, you're easy.
But I kind of liked being free, like so I wouldn't attach my sleeping bag. I'd tuck my knees up like this and then zip it up. And then I could like wake up in the morning like upside down looking at my desk or sideways, and it just reminded me that I was in this really cool place. You can tell me if my answers are too long.
No,
you can be like,
great.
stop, Cady.
No. I love it. I thought of something while you're chatting though, and we didn't talk about this before, but you're up at the space station, you don't get to choose your team members, which you said, so you're meeting people that you might not have met before, don't know well. Do you find that space or astronauts are made up of more extroverts or introverts, or is it a big mix? Like when you're up there in the station and you're in each other's space all the time, how do people kind of, do that self-care and find space for themselves?
Well, I mean, your premise that we haven't met is not a great one. I mean, in that most times, we typically have at least done emergency training together on the ground.
Great.
But in more commonly, actually, we would have trained together for even a couple years, although in the case of my mission, at a certain point, we were like within 6 months of flying. And the crew ahead of us was maybe going to get rearranged, and I got a phone call from the chief of the office saying, "Hey, you might fly with these two guys from Russia. Have you met them?" I do know them, and they seem fine because everybody's fine. And I think the thing is that you asked about introverts, extroverts, and everybody is different, and you have to learn to respect that and actually just not draw conclusions. Like just because somebody is quiet certainly doesn't mean they don't have something to say.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And everybody has their own way of being nervous. Like before a big activity, when the big supply ship came up and we were going to capture it, my way is to like practice, and other people, they have different ways of being nervous, and to recognize, oh, this isn't them. I mean, it is them, but this is nervous, and that's what I should realize. What do they need from me? Maybe it's nothing. So there's all But what I find is fascinating, we are all really different, and you can just look at any space crew's photograph, and you will realize these are really different people. And I think it's very common, it has a lot in common here, living in a place where everybody's dedicated to the same mission and has their part of that mission to accomplish, but they really don't choose each other.
Right.
And even in your family, it's like easy to wish people were different or whatever, but I think it's actually the mission that helps us do something that is actually really quite hard, which is to be patient and always look for what do these people that are different than me, different is valuable. Absolutely. It's not always comfortable, but it's really valuable, and to keep thinking, what do they bring to the team, because we need it.
Right. And we talked a bit about that with just doing science, how important it is to be creative, collaborative, and to have people from different perspectives, different backgrounds, to have that mix of knowledge and just respecting where people are coming from and where they're going, and how that makes science stronger. You don't have to be one way.
I mean, as a tiny example, in our family, we kind of all like to fly. Except my stepson is older than my son, our son, and he hasn't gone as much with us in our small plane. We have a little Cessna, and so he was in town, and I was like, "Hey, Josiah, we're going to go up to Vermont. You want to go?" And he said, "Yes." And he and his wife came, and he's a landscape architect. Everything plants and botany and why they're planted and should they be planted and what's natural, what's useful. His brain thinks in that way, and I learned more about Vermont, looking down at that landscape on a trip I had made many times. In just that short trip, I learned a ton, because I just never looked at it through someone like his eyes.
That's good. Yeah, everyone has so much to offer in their own way. I really appreciate that. And this is jumping ahead a little bit now, but I think because we've kind of been talking about this, I would love to plug your book, because we've been talking a bit about this idea now of sharing space with each other, and you've written this incredible book that maybe now's a good time to tell people what it's about and what you're hoping readers get from it.
Well, I mean, the missions that we're here to talk about, I mean, they're important, and we just discussed that everyone's contribution is important. And so that's really what my book celebrates. It's called Sharing Space, an astronaut's guide to mission, wonder, and making change. Because the way that we interact in science, it's not always been easy for everyone to be recognized in science. And I am always interested when I go to a museum, like I went to the Inuit Museum in Churchill, and in the books that were there tell me about the history that they want to celebrate. And it's interesting that they celebrate a lot of women's history, the difference that women made in history, which is interesting to me. So I wrote a book called Sharing Space, because I think when each of us shares our own experiences, for me, it's not true of everybody, but for me it's helpful when I realize that maybe some experience that wasn't really comfortable for me. I mean, or just not, I don't know. I'm an astronaut. I'm going to go to space. I might be assigned to do a spacewalk. You just assume that you'll have a spacesuit that fits you. And I did for a few years, and I did quite well in the spacesuit, but then they eliminated the small size spacesuits. And that affected actually more than a third of the women astronauts. And so I had to learn to work in a much bigger suit. And I had to, I mean, we always need to be doing our job. We need to show that we can do the task, whether it's in a big suit or, it doesn't matter if it's harder for you. I mean, it does actually matter, right? But in the end, the mission has to be, I need to show them. And them is a bunch of people who don't know what it's like to be a smaller person in a giant suit.
They've always had a suit that fits.
They've always had a suit that fits, exactly. Or most times. And actually, even no matter how empathetic you are, which many of my colleagues are, I have many colleagues on these patches. And often I think it's, one of the things to do is to figure out how can I explain to them in terms that they can understand why this is hard, not in a complaining way, but in a way that says, how can you help me mitigate this? And so I had to do a lot of that, but it does take, in order to do stuff, you have to show up, and sometimes I would show up as an astronaut, even as an astronaut, to meetings like about spacewalking, and they kind of look at you like, you just see this, like, I wonder why Cady's here. She's kind of small. And they don't say that, but it's there. And so you have to just kind of act like it doesn't bother you when it actually does, right? But I'd much rather just kind of cheerfully show up, do what I need to do there, show that I'm interested, that I know I need to learn stuff and I have a lot to learn, and that I am just as passionate about the mission as they are. So there's those kinds of lessons in here, and I kind of think that it shows that if we have to learn those kinds of lessons in the astronaut world, then that means that there are those kinds of lessons to be learned. I mean, things, that are not quite fair or not fair happen still today, so much more than we think. And I'm more on the end of what could we do about it. So I shared some of my impressions of how I could do something about it. And I think, maybe they'll resonate. I think they resonate with many scientists who, I get to ask you a question maybe. Do you think that people understand how hard it is to do science up here on polar bears in Churchill?
I don't know, maybe not the full realities of it. We do get asked that a lot, and I think when we explain it, it makes sense. I think for many people, similar to space, it's just so outside of the norm of what you see day to day. So kind of, one example is we have these tracking devices on certain polar bears, and they fail more often than we would like. And
I didn't know.
And people see that. We have a bear tracker. You can go online and see where the bears are, and then all of a sudden these collars aren't working for a while. And I think for some people in the public, it's like, well, what's the problem here? Get these things to work. Understandably, they feel that way. And then we can kind of come in and say, well, the Arctic is freezing cold. These bears are rubbing on ice and snow. They're swimming in icy, salty water. The technology with batteries, especially in wildlife, which there's not a lot of money in, it only goes so far. And explaining how, we can't, in the middle of the winter, in the dark, in the cold, we can't physically get ourselves out there as often as we would like or how we would like to. And then I think people are, okay, that makes sense. But I'm probably similar to explaining space. It's just so outside of our day-to-day. You kind of need someone to build that picture for you, and then it's okay, that is really, really different and difficult. So
and why it's hard, and
it is hard. Yeah,
I mean, just people when you're in an environment where it can be, it was really windy last night.
Oh my God, it was so windy.
It does not get windy in space, okay? and that's a little stressful for people. And then the staff really explains, listen, this place is really anchored and it's not going anywhere. And but it reminds you that you're really in the elements, and everybody has to take care of themselves. They have to take care of their crewmates. When we're outside, looking maybe at polar bears that are right outside the lodge there, that we have to make sure no one's left out there alone.
Right.
Because what if they slip and get hurt, or we always do things together, and there's a lot of similarities there with space. And I don't think when we're trying to do science, a lot of people just think it's so easy to just say, what data do we need? Then let's go get it, and let's show everybody that this is what we should do next. And the problem is, it's there's a
only.
lot of things a lot of data we'd like to have.
Oh,
And
so much data, so many
almost
questions.
all of it is,
Yeah.
it takes logistics, it takes money, it takes, and also you can't go chasing these bears around because
know.
then you
We have to
disturb
respecting the
them.
bears. Yeah, there's a lot of obstacles to get good science done, and there's no end of questions. Oh my gosh, we've learned so much about polar bears in the last several decades, but we still have, so much more we need to
learn.
know. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and this problem solving. That lodge example was great last night with the wind. That maybe was a good example of people kind of working together who don't know each other at all to help each other with the doors coming in and out. People are running through the kind of gaps because the wind is just flying, and trying to make sure if people are maybe having a drink that they're trying to carry, that things aren't going flying.
Because we're bringing our
hats aren't
coffee
flying.
from the
Exactly.
the coffee place in the morning. Somebody had and I was like, hey, I could take one of those mugs of coffee for you. Because probably with two, it's going to be hard. And just being
working
observant
together.
of what people might need. And plus, if there is a really amazing, I don't remember, 80-something.
Oh,
90-something,
maybe 90-something.
90-something original board member named Freddie, who's just simply amazing. And
she's incredible.
You do not want to assume that Freddie needs help at the door.
Right.
Because Freddie probably doesn't.
Yeah.
But there's other people you just, you think, oh, they're kind of big, strong person, but they're not always thinking like when I'm somebody that has been pretty well trained, like, okay, what's it going to take to do that?
Right.
And am I ready? Have I put things in the right pockets or made sure I put my bag down?
Right.
But not, some people will be like, and then they're doing it the wrong way and they get hurt.
Right, and we definitely don't want that.
No.
So you're such a solutions-oriented person
I am.
and overcoming challenges. Have you always been like that? Like when you were a kid, did you dream of space, or how did you find yourself there?
I did not dream of space. I did grow up in a family where exploration was normal.
That's a big
And I will
deal.
say, I'll give you the punchline, which is I didn't decide that I wanted to be an astronaut until I was 21, 22. I was a senior in college.
Okay.
And it's because, I didn't meet people like you when I was 6 years old. Or I didn't see you, and I didn't see you on TV. I didn't read about you in books, in my library for kids, or a library for adults, or see you on the really bad, scratchy TV, right?
Yeah.
And so my dad worked in exploration. He was a deep sea diver, like hard hats and all those other kinds of things. And living underwater was something, he was part of that effort to build capsules, literally, that go underwater and figuring out what are the conditions. And so you'd think that I might think, oh, I could do that. But he had his friends were named Uncle Squirrely and Black Bart and Goliath.
Ooh.
And so it was a long time until I met Sylvia Earle.
Oh, she's
A woman
incredible.
that made history in
Mission
the oceans.
Blue. Yeah.
Yes. And so I didn't see role models. That's a long way to say I didn't see role models. Not everybody needs that, but I need that. And actually many people do. You don't necessarily have to say role model, mentor. I needed to kind of see, I say see, but experience people that did these things where I thought, wow. And when Sally Ride came to speak at my college, I just thought, wow. She cares so much about astronomy and astrophysics and and how to discover that world and how to share it. And yet she also wants this kind of cool adventure in her life. She's the first American woman astronaut.
Right.
And so I just thought, maybe if Sally can do that, maybe I could try to do that too.
I love that so much. And maybe a question I have that I haven't really asked you yet. How are you coming up with what science you are doing in space? Are you driving that? I assume it's a team effort. What sort of questions are you asking, and how is that impacting then us people on Earth?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because normally I would tell you that it's literally not our science in general, unless an astronaut happens to be particularly skilled in one particular area.
Sure.
Like Kate Rubins had done a lot of genetics and things like that on the ground, and so having that be the start of doing a lot of that kind of research up in space made a lot of sense, and she was the first person to sequence DNA up in space.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. So unless it's exactly your field, but we all become sort of people of all trades, and even pilots are doing science experiments, and the experiments are chosen by by NASA, by NASA's partners, European, everybody. But it's about what research would really make a difference, and can we do it, and making sure it can be done safely. So that's a long way of saying that there's a lot of cool things that we do up there. Almost all of them, something I'm really proud of, come right back to Earth. Like, we do a lot of osteoporosis research.
Oh, wow.
Because osteoporosis is about the fact that your bones are weaker, typically in women. And when we go up to space, what a woman who is 70 years old who has osteoporosis, what she loses in a year, I lose in a month, in 30 days. It's a lot, about 1.5% of my body mass I will lose.
Incredible.
And so that's about bone dissolving and not getting rebuilt. And that's actually happening to all of us every day, but the processes kind of keep up with each other. I mean, you, me, everybody in Buggy One here.
Yeah.
But something happens differently up in space in the microgravity environment, and we seem to lose bone faster. That's bad news, right?
Right.
But the good news is it makes it easier to study, because the bigger the change is, the easier it is to measure it. But also, it makes it easier for us to say, well, what happens if we exercise all the time? And, well, not all the time, but what happens if we exercise literally every day?
Right, which you did.
And we did both
right,
aerobic and weightlifting, even though everything's weightless up there. We actually have a machine. It kind of runs on basically tension.
Okay.
It's like
Some
pulling a
resistance.
can out of a resistance. Sorry.
Yeah.
A can out of a can, and if you put a little hole at the back of that, it'd be a little easier.
Yeah.
If you put a big hole at the back of the can, it would be a lot easier. Sure. So we can actually do 600 to 600 pounds.
Up to 600 pounds.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we have all sorts of weightlifting we could do, and we are coming back with all of our bone mass. And so I literally came back with the same amount of bone. It might be remodeled different. If your bone is like a pipe, we're losing bone out of the meaty middle, and it might be sort of plating on the outside. And what does that mean if you think of me as a skyscraper? When I'm older, what does that mean about how strong my building is? We'll find out, because we get tested all the time.
Sure.
So I mean, and I don't know. Just that in general, it's not that I want to teach you all about everything we can do up there, but just the general idea of things happening differently, like in combustion. In combustion is a really complicated process. It happens so fast, right? And if you look at a candle flame on Earth, then you light the candle flame, and then the lighter gases are rising like a hot air balloon, right?
Yeah.
New fuels coming in, and it's a really dynamic process. You have to measure things in less than a second, way less than a second, in order to determine the slope of the line. Up in space, those lighter gases, weightless, not rising, right? Even, hot air balloon stuff does not work up there, right?
Interesting,
And
yes.
so everything stays closer to home. The flames are spherical, right? No place for new fuel. So things happen slower, and we can make the same measurements over 30 or 40 seconds.
Wow,
so we get
that's
so
massive
many.
difference.
Yes, and you know this from polar bear stuff, where the numbers of bears and how many times you get to.
Data.
I'm putting words in your mouth.
No. You said something this morning, which is data speaks, and it really does.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to get great data. One of the reasons that we really celebrate these polar bears here in Churchill, these Western Hudson Bay polar bears, we have the best data on these polar bears than any other population in the world. And that's really allowed us to be able to see the impacts of climate change on them, and to understand their diets, and to better be able to, if we understand this population, then extrapolate, kind of use what we know here and apply that to other populations that are still doing well, but might not for long term as we continue to lose sea ice. So what can we learn and apply in other places, like you applying things to Earth that you learn in space? Yeah.
Well, and the fact that the data that you have collected actually shows that, with the sea ice being less, they have less access to sea ice, which is where they hunt, right? And they haven't, like these bears that we still have our bear probably sleeping and really waiting, when do I get to
saving his energy, he's hungry. And actually this is a great point. So we've got Albert producing the show. Thank you, Albert, behind the scenes. This might be a great chance here to show these clips. So we've, just to highlight what Cady was saying there, I want to show you a couple clips of polar bears hunting or attempting to hunt, and it really drives home how they need Arctic sea ice. So this is something we saw last year, 2 years ago. So this is at this time of the year, there's no ice on Hudson Bay, and there's a seal in that water that this polar bear sees. And this polar bear desperately wants that seal. It's, you know, this bear hasn't eaten for months. It wants that tasty seal blubber. But because there's no sea ice, it has a hard time trying to get to that seal. And this seal knows it. It was like taunting this bear. It was incredible to see. So you're going to see this polar bear try to figure out, how can I catch the seal if I don't have sea ice? Seals are incredible swimmers. Polar bears are too, but seals can outswim a polar bear. So you can see this bear trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do here? And you can also see how fast they go. So there's that seal. You see that dot out in the water. And here's a little sequence here. After this, the bear kind of just sat down on the beach dejectedly. There we go. No,
wow.
The bear tries, and the seal is gone in a flash, so that didn't work.
Yeah.
So the bear expended a lot of energy and didn't get any food. We can compare that to another clip we have. This is taken in Svalbard. Some snowmobilers shared this with us. So this is a polar bear sneaking up on a seal on sea ice. The seal is on the ice. The bear has a way to access that seal, sneaks up on it, grabs it, and is able to secure that seal, and it does eventually drag it away and have a meal. So it just drives home that the bears need the ice to catch their food, and food is so critical. Calories are so critical, and Cady has also a great explanation of calories.
I'm so proud. I mean, so you do lectures here.
Yes.
Scientists that are coming to work or, you know, give lectures. And Louise talked last night and was explaining, I mean, talking about just the system of energy of, you know, how much energy does a polar bear have?
Yeah.
And how much, I mean, how can they live over the year? And so what does it mean to catch that seal, right? And she captured this in terms of Halloween. And
perfect.
And actually candy. And so a seal needs, a seal, what it means, if we think of how much like fat, right?
Yeah,
Do I just say
and calories,
fat and calories. A seal needs this Reese's peanut butter cup. Not one, not two, not three, or I mean, so how much does it, when a polar bear catches a seal and gets to use that as his or her food, 4, 5, I mean, I could keep counting, but the number that we're gonna, a seal is worth 1,700 and I think 49
in that range,
somewhere
mid-1700s.
I remember 1,700 Reese's peanut butter cups. Okay, so that is one seal.
And polar bears can easily eat a seal in one sitting.
Really?
That size ring seal. Yeah, so they'll eat over 100 pounds of blubber in one sitting. So they are just gorging on these calories when they can, and then we see them having to rest this feast and fast they really have adapted to. In space, you were talking a bit about kind of how they calculate calories in food. It was so fascinating how they've kind of made these decisions and what you're eating up there.
Well, I mean, I mean, food is important in all these places where somebody is. We're doing research, and actually in space. So I love that you're seeing my home, and actually my crew took that picture. And if you look on the left of it, that is the space station hanging off the end on the left, and then the whole space station is it's the size of about 10 train cars without the seats in them.
Oh wow!
So it's actually quite big.
It's bigger
it's
than
not
I
small.
thought.
I mean, the capsules that we go up in, those are small, right?
Okay.
But the space station itself is big, and keeping everybody happy, whether it's here in Churchill, in Antarctica, where I also did some training.
Of course, yeah.
Food is it's a very human kind of thing, and it's important. But that doesn't mean that anybody goes to space for the food.
Fair enough.
We have about half dehydrated food.
Okay.
And we have about half food that's already made up. Some of it is the same food the Army uses.
Okay.
Some of it is from stores where they have a little package of stuff. And you can even do like rice, and I could do like Thai curry.
Okay.
And you think that might be a mess, but it needs to be kind of sticky rice, or you put like a little less water in there, you know, and or it's already that way.
Yeah.
And then as long as you're kind of careful and you take your Thai food and stick it in there, you know, I mean, if you fling your spoon, it's
a mess.
Well, it will go as far as it can until it runs into something, and it will probably be your crewmate who might be wearing, like, we only get like 6 clean shirts, and you know, if you fling something by accident, it's going to land on somebody's clean shirts. Yeah.
So are you all choosing what you feel like eating that day, or are you having family meals and eating the same thing together? How does that work?
We call it picking your food.
Okay, I like that. Yeah.
And typically there's boxes that will have like the meat and eggs in this box. And
Okay.
so you'll kind of like go and pick out of each box for what you want, or somebody will say, I'm going to go pick food. Does anybody want anything special? After a while, you know what each other loves.
Aw.
And so, but it's kind of this process takes some time.
Sure.
You have to go pick it. You have to, and like, let's say we're going to pick, I mean, think about, a vegetable, a meat, a starch. Let's just say 3 things for each person. There's 6 people on the crew. That's 18 packages. You can see that it's really fun.
Oh, neat.
It's really fun it is really fun to eat, and it's like a science experiment. I mean, those little gummy bears are weightless, and so when you want to do science on things, the fact that they're floating around gives you an added experiment variable that's really
Sure.
great. But when you are trying to pick your food, like those 18 things, if you have 18 packages, where are you going to put them all? Like one here, a couple here, but then are you going to go anywhere?
Yeah.
And so you have to have thought to bring a bag, put all that stuff in there.
You gotta go shopping for your
Yeah,
food.
but we have macaroni and cheese and strudel and eggs and oatmeal.
Do you have a favorite?
I liked beef stroganoff.
Oh, nice.
I liked Fiesta chicken, which
Ooh,
is
fun.
with chicken and sauce and cheese. And we'd have tortillas. And tortillas, bread is not so practical. We brought, the U.S. brings tortillas as bread. The Russians bring tiny little loaves of bread, like this big.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really fun. And they're great.
Yeah.
Because it'd be hard to keep a whole loaf good, but
Makes sense.
so we have to have everything sealed up and all those
Yeah.
kinds of things. But it's fun to eat, but it also, like, even eating is a science experiment.
Sure,
up
every
there.
time.
Yep.
Did you have a meal you were really looking forward to when you got back to Earth?
Well, we had an Italian, Paolo Nespoli, on our crew, and so pizza was at the top of the list.
course.
And in a way, everybody missed texture
Oh, okay.
because
sure.
you just couldn't. I mean, potato chips.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Right? They'd be.
Oh, goodness.
It's practically a hazard. I mean, if you opened up a bag of flour in space.
Oh, you would never.
Well, it'd actually be quite dangerous.
Oh, my
Really,
goodness,
because it's
yeah.
everywhere in the atmosphere. And we have a special alarm for atmosphere where, I mean, nobody's going to have a bag of flour, but
Sure.
but if there's a toxic atmosphere and within a minute we have to go and grab our masks, put our masks on, kind of
Wow.
thing, because it's just everywhere. But it's one thing to have that, for some big scientific reason, and it's another thing if it's your bag of potato chips, which is everywhere. Now, in this case, it's not toxic,
Right.
and we have a lot of air filtration. It ends up on the vent, and somebody figured out that it ends up on like a screen
Okay.
in front of one of the fans. So if you do want to eat your potato chips that your mom sends you,
Oh.
then you can eat them in front of the fan. They end up collecting on the screen, and then you can vacuum the screen.
Okay.
So,
That's
but
a good
it's
way to
still
do
not
it.
too much crunchy stuff up there.
No, that sounds fair when you explain it like that. I'm just imagining the feeling of you blasting off into space. Is it such a relief when you dock at the space station when it finally clicks and you're good to go? Is it like a really good feeling, or what is that like?
Can we show that video?
Yeah, I
Is it
think if Albert, if
possible?
you can find that video.
Just because it
we'll see if you
shows
can.
launching and things. And
Oh yeah.
I will say,
that same
launch
clip.
and landing in a serious way, they're the most dangerous parts.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
space is the safe place to be. There's our space station. And so you can see why it looks like the Tundra buggy.
Oh, I love
This is,
it.
everybody's saying goodbye before they climb
Unreal.
on the buggy. Our buggy goes a little faster than your buggy.
Yeah, I bet.
So even before we clear the launch pad, we're going like 100 miles an hour.
Oh my gosh.
And then here we are coming. So this is like a Tundra buggy
okay.
coming into dock with either
Sure.
people or supplies.
Yeah.
So we dock, and now you're in this place where life is different. We
Yep.
fly everywhere, and you can see my hair is like big and
Yeah,
kind of sticking
have
up.
fun.
And I hold my self in place by sliding and tucking my feet in. I came home with calluses on the tops of my feet. We're all
You
people, and scientists are
Oh,
people,
wow.
engineers are people, pilots are people. All of us bring our own things that make us kind of feel at home. There's the space station in a different view, and this is what it looks like to look out at the Earth. And I was really inspired flying up here over all this beautiful country and the lakes, and
Yeah.
actually we saw Aurora Borealis.
You did. Oh, good.
The Northern
I'm glad.
Lights the other night, and this is them from space. I didn't see them like every night. This film is kind of sped up here,
Sure.
and so this is the cities. If you see little sparkly white lights, they're all lightning.
Oh,
And then you see a little
fun.
green glow of the atmosphere, which
Yeah.
is very thin. And I always had to film in Ireland because that's where both halves of my family come from. But it's like home, and can we just freeze it right there? Right there, exactly. So just looking at the space station like that, I think you can see why when we pulled up in the Tundra buggy, I felt like I was at a space station. And I mean, it has all these elements. You know, it has mission, it has safety, it has all sorts of people with different personalities who are all doing their part of the mission and have to give each other room or space, so to speak. There's no, don't believe the movies. There's no walking the plank. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's and I loved living up there. And we have military people in both our countries. You know, spending time in places that are much harder than the space station. But it's amazing to live and work up there. Can I talk about the stranded people?
Yeah, I think that. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. I think that's important that we touch on that. People must be wondering.
Because, you know, so my friends Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams are up in space. They went up in June on an experimental spacecraft, trying a spacecraft for the first time. It already had been tried without people, put people in there, and they discovered there were some problems in terms of the landing, of what's going to happen with the jets that maneuver it when we want to then come in for a landing. We undock from the space station. We position ourselves at exactly the right angle to be like going against where we were going. You know, so we slow down from 17,500 miles an hour
unreal
to 17,200 miles an hour. And so I'll do that
math
for everybody, but it's 300 miles an hour that we slow down. And we were going really, really, really fast, and I mean, so fast, 17,000, right?
Yeah.
By only 300 miles an hour. It's enough to guarantee that we are going to then, we don't have enough momentum to stay in orbit. We're going to land on the other side of the Earth. Incredible. And that's why those jets that position us and give us that boost to slow down, to brake, are so important. And so the spacecraft that Butch and Sunny were in had trouble. They ended up the best place to study the trouble was to fire those jets and test them in space. And once you get them home, they tested them home. They were fine. So they did a lot of science. They did a lot of experimentation. They really understood what the problem was, but not how to be able to predict that they could prevent the problems they were having with the jets. So Butch and Sunny, it was the safest way for them to get home was on another spacecraft. So they had to wait for the next buggy to come up and show up and bring them, and and take them home. So they will be coming home in February. I say everybody, but it's everybody but the people who know, who've been to space, literally, and their friends and family, who all understand what a magical and amazing place it is to work on the projects of yours and other people's dreams. I mean, I challenge you to go and look at the NASA Plus is the new NASA streaming place. Or look anywhere on YouTube about NASA stuff. Look up Sunny and Butch. Look at the expressions on those faces, and you will realize that this is people living their dreams. They're so happy. And a really practical thing, on the space station, we have a to-do list just like on your, in your house, right? And there's just, in our house, we live in an old house, built in 1810, okay? There's stuff in the attic from however long. What if you came back, what if two people showed up at your door and just said, hi, we're gonna stay for 8 days, but then they stayed for 8 months. And they said, well, we think we're just going to work on some of your projects. And what if they inventoried everything and organized everything in your attic, plus all of your spare clothes and things and tools in the tool shed, and in this old New England house where water runs through the basement? What if they fixed the leak in the basement?
You know, I would take that help.
So now that they had 2 extra people doing all this work, they completely decimated the to-do list.
Incredible.
And that means that it is time for more science. And I'm not just being slick about that. Suddenly they cleared the decks of all the crap that never got done, and that way we can do more science up on the space station.
Well, it sounds like they're going to be just fine. That is so good to hear, because we are hearing about it in the media. Go Butch and Sunny.
And even look up Sunny Williams' space station tour. She will take you around the space station. And I think you'll understand why it has a lot very related to our Tundra buggy lodge.
And the lounge at the lodge. So
and the lounge at the lodge.
Which is also very nice to hang out in.
Well, it's actually a place to gather.
Isn't it nice?
And it's really important, for people to make these ideas work. They have to be able to talk about them together. The sleeping quarters are pretty, they're not so much that they're cramped, but people are sleeping. So you can't really talk in the hallways past sort of bedtime. It's rude, right? And so having a place together, and I tell this story because I don't know if you noticed in the film that our kitchen table was kind of at like an angle.
Yeah, okay.
And for 10 years, that kitchen table right in the middle of the space station. So one half of the space station over here, the other half is here. This happens to be the Russian half, the US half. And the kitchen table was exactly in the way that everybody going through would hit their hip on the way to the Russian side of the space station. They'd hit their other hip on the other side. 10 years, everybody banging into the table. And Paolo, my teammate, Italy, just a design thinking, problem solving, visual guy.
Yeah.
As soon as it was our turn to be in charge of the space station, he unhooked that table and made it not like against the wall, completely out of the way, but no place for people to gather and kind of just be human together, right?
Sure.
And he figured out a good angle to gather, but actually have it be out of the way.
Nice. Oh, good problem solving. I just
perspectives.
love that. And perspective.
I mean,
Yeah.
People did not see that for 10 years.
Right. And it just took someone to think of a little tweak, and then it makes everyone's lives a little bit better.
Exactly.
Oh, I
And the
love
same,
that.
you know, I think you have to be really innovative out
You
here.
do. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges and a lot of beauty. And I did want to ask you, we're coming, if anyone does have a question, this is such a great conversation. We could talk all day. I did want to ask you, when you're up in space and you're looking down on Earth, did you see the Arctic? We don't even have to actually really even call out the Arctic, but just kind of, we talked about this conservation mindset, like saying, okay, here's our Earth. We have one. This is what we need to share resources, share space, and protect long term. Did you, any feelings you had around just seeing the Earth like that for the first time, or?
Well, for the first time, I was with my crewmate, and we saw Massachusetts, where I live, for the very first time.
Fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my crewmate, Al Sacco, looked down and he goes, and Massachusetts has this Cape Cod, it's sort of this big cape, like a little scorpion tail, and it's very noticeable. He goes, oh my gosh, it's just like the map. Which, I mean, it's true.
Of course it would.
How did they make maps when they couldn't look down? And it's amazing.
Incredible.
But so that's the first time. But then when you're not just there for a week, but you live there.
Yeah.
I thought I would be going to, when I went to space, I would be like going somewhere else. And then when I really did that, which is then about 400 kilometers away from the Earth, like if my fist is the Earth, we're only 400 kilometers away, it's really not very far, right? And so even though it's hard to get home, I just felt still close to home. I felt like home was actually just bigger than everybody thought.
Oh,
and so the view that we have from up there, I think, is really valuable. I mean, there's even just photographic series of photographs over the years that show how the Earth has changed. And now it's a high definition camera is making all sorts of measurements now. But there's a lake in Africa, I don't actually remember the name, but it was 20,000 square kilometers. And even when I went on my very first mission in 1995, it was already just like 2,000 square kilometers.
Oh my goodness.
Some huge change, and all that drying up of water. Now it's dust, and we can actually see dust going around the world. You see how something that happens in one place really affects every place, and even though we don't actually we're at an inclination of 51.6 degrees. Okay. And I think you're at 58 up here. Yeah. So we're always kind of looking up towards the Arctic. And so we can definitely see it. But you can see changes. And while I was up there in space, we actually had a tsunami that we didn't have, but a tsunami struck Japan.
Right. Oh, that was.
And looking down, you can tell. And you can tell when things are different. You can tell from just sort of the feel of the geography in different places. And in our cameras, certainly we can have a feel for it, but our cameras are the cameras of scientists, and they are measuring. And there's no question that the Earth is changing.
What you said about one thing kind of affecting the whole Earth, that's really, we talk a lot about that with Arctic sea ice and polar bears, and we had a great chat this morning about, is it about the polar bears, or is it something bigger? And for us, it's a bit of both. We love these bears, and we think they're so incredible and cool species, but maybe the most incredible thing about them is this umbrella idea, this umbrella species, and their Arctic sea ice habitat, which is good for polar bears. They absolutely need it, which we mentioned, but this Arctic sea ice impacting the entire planet and acting as Earth's air conditioner, forming the base of the Arctic food chain and keeping that ice around. And we can see so directly with the bears how much they're impacted by the presence or absence of sea ice. And we're really, working collaboratively with people from different backgrounds, solutions-minded, to keep Arctic sea ice in the Arctic. Which means, changing our fuel systems and our energy systems. And it's going to be a lot of work, but I think you and astronauts, just people like you that are so minded in that way to overcome obstacles, are really helping push us in the right direction with that sort of thing.
Well, everybody has their own gifts that they bring, and like I've learned things certainly since I've been here, and even just getting ready for the trip, but even today, and getting ready and picking a spot and learning about the bears, but learning about, the analogy that you said that soil is to the forest as the ocean is...
As the sea ice is to the ocean. Yeah,
the sea ice is to the ocean.
The soil of the ocean.
Which I didn't understand that this was such a trapping of nutrients. I thought about things like the seals, right?
Sure.
And so, I'm always learning. And something that I think is really important is that you should celebrate everything that you find out that you didn't know before. It's not because you're not smart. It's not because you should have known this. Everything you learn is important, and so you shouldn't be like, I'm learning about climate change. I'm asking you questions probably other people know tons about, and and yet it's so important to understand it in a way where you realize how important it is. And looking at graphs last night that show, through modeling and figuring out how much is there really going to be for the polar bears to eat. They've gone from, how many thousands, right, in the past to, or I'm not sure what this beginning number is.
Yeah, well, for these polar bears here, we had about 1,200 in the 80s.
In this area.
In this area, and we've about 618 today, so we have lost almost half this population, and that's this pressure on these families, and it's harder to have babies and raise those cubs up and that sort of thing. So it is a challenge, but I am inspired by.
I'm totally inspired. I love polar bears. A lot of people do, right? But but that actually makes it, instead of me saying, I don't know enough about climate change, Elise, can you help me learn that? While we're doing this about a species, about polar bears where they're so cute, I know, do not touch them. I get this.
I know, it's tempting.
But it makes it an easier way for all of us to learn, because you're telling stories about something they're facts, right? But it's a way of relating about something that is easy to kind of go, oh, and we just assume they'll always be there. But it also shows us, if we can just look at their environment and realize their environment is changing, the Earth is changing. And each of us is going to have our own ideas of how to change that change. And all your ideas are important, all of us.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And that's a great note to start to wrap up on. But I wanted to give you the chance, if there's anything else you want to share or that we didn't get to during this chat today, is there anything else you'd like to add?
If you need anybody to work in the kitchen and spend those 2 months, I'm retired now.
Ooh.
I'm a safety girl.
Yeah, you'd be a wonderful addition out here, I have no doubt.
Anyways, I've really loved coming up here and getting to understand what life is like doing this kind of science, and I'm just really, and not to mention it was so. It's really fascinating to see these bears in their natural environment, and yet in a way that is very respectful of them.
Oh, well, that's wonderful to hear. Well, we sure appreciate you being here and then coming out with us today on Tundra Buggy One to share your life experiences. And again, your book, Sharing Space. Yes, check it out. It is incredible. So if you're looking for a book to read, or the holidays are coming up, a great book to gift as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for spending Polar Bear Week with us. It's been an awesome week. We have another couple days of it, so check out our social media on polarbearsinternational.org, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We've got some really wonderful assets out there, lots of fun pictures and facts and videos. Also explore.org. We will be live streaming the polar bears for the next several weeks. Next week we're celebrating moms and cubs. It should be a lot of fun.
Really?
I mean, who doesn't love moms and cubs, right? And also happy Halloween, everybody. For the Churchill kids, they've got some extra backup tonight. There will be patrols all over town so they can safely trick or treat. And we are opening up our Polar Bears International House Interpretive Center for the local kids to stop by, so that will be really fun. Big shout out to our team. Thank you again, Cady Coleman, for being here with us today.
Well, thanks for sharing such important stories.
Yeah, wonderful to have you. Great. Thank you, everybody. We will see you out on the Tundra again soon. Future generations of people and polar bears depend on the decisions and plans that we make today. A polar bear's life cycle is almost exclusively tied to the sea ice. Because polar bears rely on sea ice to hunt, to breed, and sometimes to den, sea ice loss from climate change is their biggest threat, and the reason the bears are listed as vulnerable on the IUCN's Red List of Threatened Species. What we learn about climate change impacts on polar bears in Hudson Bay can be applied across the Arctic to help conserve other populations. Climate change is already affecting some populations of polar bears. Since we get most of our energy from fossil fuels, we are producing huge amounts of carbon dioxide. You see, regular amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere act like a blanket around the Earth, trapping heat and keeping our planet at a stable temperature. However, when we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas for energy, we pump rampant amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This buildup thickens the blanket, trapping too much heat, disrupting the climate, and melting Arctic sea ice. When Arctic waters are cold enough, the top layer freezes into a special type of ice called sea ice. Sea ice is to the ocean what soil is to a forest. It supports the entire Arctic food chain. Food from this marine ecosystem also sustains northern communities. The key to getting the climate back to functioning the way it should, and to preserving a future for polar bears across the Arctic, is to move away from using fossil fuels for energy altogether. The most important thing we can do is vote with the climate in mind to let our leaders know we support a swift transition to renewable energy sources. In the meantime, we can directly participate in and learn more about our local and regional renewable energy options. We can all make a difference outside our own households by influencing where our energy comes from. Because together, we can make sure that polar bears roam the Arctic sea ice for generations to come.